This was one of the most expensive buildings built in the world. Designed by one of the greatest architects of all time, it was the epitome of the high-tech architecture movement. It was so advanced that it couldn't even be fully built in Hong Kong. Much of it had to be built overseas first and then shipped over like giant Lego pieces. They brought together some of the brightest minds in the world and pulled off some of the most audacious innovations, like installing this giant sun scoop to reflect light into a building. But does it actually work? And what's the deal with these beams on the outside of the building? Aren't they supposed to be holding it up from the inside? And what happened to the ground floor lobby? Wait, where is it? Oh, and what are those? I spent weeks deep diving into this building, poring over hundreds of pages and analyzing countless drawings. I've now distilled the most fascinating insights in this video, and trust me, you don't want to miss this. At the time of completion, this building reported to cost over 5 billion Hong Kong dollars. To give you some perspective, another bank building constructed around the same time, just down the road, reported to cost only 1 billion. Yep, that's 1/5 of that. That means the amount of money spent on this building could have bought you 5 of these. So why was it so expensive? And was it even worth it? Well, my answer might surprise you. First, we have to go back in history and understand who could even afford such a building, and why. The Hong Kong Shanghai Bank had occupied the site for over a century, and it had a history of owning grand buildings. The previous building was an architectural marvel of its time. One of the tallest buildings in Hong Kong, it exuded grandeur. It was a symbol of their status. And when they commissioned their Shanghai headquarters, the instructions was to spare no expense, dominate the bun. So naturally, the brief for this new Hong Kong building was to be the best bank building in the world. However, this building was believed to be a crucial element in its feng shui of the whole colony. The building stopped all the good fortune running down the hill and into the harbour. Hence, removing it would have threatened the stability and prosperity of Hong Kong. In fact, following the demolition of this building, and when excavation reached bedrock, the Hang Seng Index plummeted to half its value from the previous year. So when the bank approached architects for proposal, they were asked to investigate options to keep part of the existing building in operation during construction. They sought the best architects in the world, ones with international reputation and proven experience in building a tower. Yet after reviewing several architects' proposals, they decided to commission Norman Foster. Norman, at that time, had not built anything over 4 stories high. It was actually his emphasis on flexibility in his proposal that stood apart from the rest of the competitors. In Foster's proposal, he detailed how the construction of the bank could happen in several phases. Foster first proposed to construct structural cores on both sides of the site, and then bridging the office floors over the existing banking hall. This allowed the banking hall to be in operation as they built the tower above. And when the new tower was completed, the bank could move everyone into that new tower and demolish the old building. Or not, the bank had the option to retain the front tower if they wanted to. And when they were ready to demolish the old building, the new tower could extend forward in a similar construction sequence by introducing additional cores. This idea of having cores on the side of the building was quite revolutionary at that time. Most towers at that time had structural cores in the middle of the building. This wouldn't be possible if they wanted to keep that existing banking hall. But in the end, the bank decided that it wasn't worth keeping, and they decided to just fully demolish the old building and make way for the brand new building. So the original idea to bridge over the banking hall wasn't even necessary anymore. But Foster still saw value in elevating the banking hall above the ground, and to leave the ground floor completely open to the public. Now, Hong Kong property prices are among the highest in the world. This ground floor estate is prime real estate. To give this up was a bold move. But what most people don't know is that by offering this public space, the planning authorities would have allowed them to put in approximately 14,000 square meters more. That's potentially a few additional floors. So this design created a true win-win for both the city and the bank, especially on the weekends. While most ground floor lobbies in the CBD are lifeless on weekends, this space is anything but. It transforms into a vibrant civic hub, a place for social gatherings, and an urban shortcut for the site. Every weekend, the Filipino community gathers here, making full use of this space. Under the space, you are protected by the sun and the wind, and that's why these glass panels extend down so low. So you will notice that between these massive columns, there are no other columns in the middle. So the whole building is, for the most part, completely suspended above. I feel that this piece of engineering ingenuity is not nearly appreciated enough. So I'm going to try to explain to you how incredible this structure is. Firstly, the building structure is mostly made of steel, a lot of steel. And all this steel came from the UK. They searched for many companies, and the company that selected in the end was actually known for building bridges. The defining feature about this structure is of course the trusses. They are held up by these masts, which are comprised of 4 steel columns connected together. Connected to these trusses are these hangers, which help pull up all the floors below, and that's how they're able to keep the space below column free. It's kind of like how a bridge structure works. This bridge structure is then repeated a few more times and stacked on top of each other. It was designed to be able to withstand earthquakes, tsunamis, and the strongest typhoons. Yeah, I said tsunamis. The structural frame was estimated to have a lifespan of over 10,000 years. They went all the way to Canada to commission this engineer to conduct a wind study that took nearly 2 years. They built a topographic model of Hong Kong that was the size of a tennis court, just to conduct wind tests. The structure was also supposed to be able to withstand terrorist attacks such as explosions. So if you had such an amazing structure, why wouldn't you have it out on display? But realistically, the structure could have been enclosed inside the building, but it would have looked a lot chunkier and pretty ordinary. But having the steel on the outside poses various challenges. Corrosion was a serious issue, especially because of Hong Kong's humid climate. So that's why all the steel members are covered with multiple layers of protection. This cementitious barrier coating was an entirely new process. Innovation was at the heart of this project. The cladding system, along with many other aspects of this building, emerged from extensive research and development. Sorry, after filming this video, I realized I forgot to talk about this. There was so much about this building that I couldn't fit. These are actually not cannons. There were rumors that they were installed to fend off bad feng shui. They were just BMUs, building maintenance units. It's a crane-like structure that helps staff clean the windows. That's it, now back to the video. Another complication of having the structure on the outside of the building was that the structure would penetrate the walls and the glazing at various locations. Now steel expands and contracts. All these junctions have to resist water penetrations during extreme conditions, such as typhoons. So these aluminium coatings had to fit like a glove. Individual panels were manufactured to the tightest tolerances. Couples, the American company who fabricated all the cladding and the glazing for this project, had to go and acquire these robotic welding machines and advanced cutting machines from Germany that could cut within 1/1000th of an inch. That's 0.0254 millimeters. The client really insisted that they research all possible international possibilities for sourcing, developing, or fabricating every part of this building. They were able to marshal the world's best resources. The structure for the glazing was also placed on the exterior. Those circular mullions on the outside is something you often don't see, and it took me a while to really appreciate it. To see so much articulation of the facade and the shadows it casts, it really breaks down the scale of the building. And I know this is such a weird, esoteric thing to say, but I guess you really need to see the building without the mullion as a structure. And I really love the sun shading structure. Close to the window, they're designed to be a compact grille for maintenance staff to walk on. And on the outer edge, they plotted the angles of each blade so that it didn't block your view looking down. These angles also helped with the sun shading at the top. And the most beautiful thing about this is this tapered angle that follows the angle of the ceilings inside. A very elegant solution. And speaking of sun, we need to talk about the sun scoop. Like I mentioned earlier, it was designed to direct sunlight into the banking hall and into the public plaza. So let's go check it out. I waited till the sunniest time of the day and made sure there was nothing overshadowing the scoop. As soon as I got in there, I realized there wasn't much sunlight at all. The bank relied heavily on artificial lighting. But how could this be? I remember reading that this was thoroughly tested by a lighting consultant in Austria. They used large-scale models and artificial skies to test the level of lighting in the bank, and I'm pretty sure I saw old photos of sunlight coming in. But later, I was able to get a better view of the sun scoop and realized that they had all the window blinds down. And it seemed like they had it down all day, every day. Something must have went wrong. Nevertheless, the banking hall is still a very impressive space. You can't help but look up when you're in the space. Many compare it to the Cathedral of Commerce. But for me, what's more exciting is actually the journey from entering the building from under the building and seeing this impressive glass belly and traveling right through the middle of it. These escalators were also implemented throughout the office floors. Foster really wanted to make this part of the everyday circulation system of the bank. The initial idea was to only allow these high-speed lifts to open out to reception areas at these double-height floors. The staff then had to utilize these escalators to reach their desired floors. Foster's claimed that this escalator reduced the amounts of lifts, while adding a social dimension, speeding up circulation and fostering interaction between floors. His concept of vertical villages grouped several floors into connected spaces, separated by double-height terraces. These double-height spaces served as communal areas between the villages. This was very different from how most conventional offices were arranged. Another fascinating aspect of this building was the toilets. The toilets were all completely prefabricated in Japan, just like cabins. Built with predominantly stainless steel, they came fully fitted with a basin, doorknobs, locks, and taps. Every little detail was custom designed, even the toilet roll holders. So they were completely finished in Japan first, then shipped to site and slotted onto the side of the buildings. I mean, how cool is that? These stainless steel bathrooms had to come in under a police escort on a special low-height trailer along a special route where all the overhang signs had to be removed. They could only fit 2 every night between midnight and 6 AM. A lot of the building services equipment were also installed in this manner. There were so many of these modules that 3 Japanese companies had to join forces to bid for this project. The benefit of these prefabricated modules was speed and quality. The toilets were fabricated in a clean and controlled environment of a Japanese workshop. They were able to start building these before the building structural steel even arrived on site. The project was under an incredibly tight program. The time that we were given was considered to be 2/3 of the average time in Europe. I mean, they had to start building before they even finished designing the building. And for the majority of that time, they were working 24/7 on site. And at one point, there were over 3,500 workers on site. At Foster's office, the average working day was 12 hours, 6 days a week. Everything was drawn by hand back then. They first started with about 12 people in Hong Kong, but at one point they were criticized to be understaffed. So Foster's moved 40 of the London staff members and their families to Hong Kong. The team ended up growing to over 120 people. That amount of people on this project was bigger than most architectural offices. So was all this worth it? The title of most expensive building in the world had since been surpassed by many other buildings. But that was never the goal of the project. In fact, the initial budget for this building was much lower than it actually costed. There was a severe budget blowout, and at one stage they were even considered abandoning the design and firing Foster's. This building was under heavy media scrutiny. The building was making headlines around the world. How not to build a masterpiece. Oriental extravaganza. Yeah, this was during a time when Chinese people were still referred to as Oriental. The bank had to hire additional experts and consultants just to try to keep the project cost down. Foster's design was constantly challenged. They eventually hired these consultants from Hamburg to conduct this study comparing this revolutionary design concept to a traditional office tower. The study confirmed that this column-free, wide-span structure provided a higher gross rental yield, and there was a potential to expand the office floor. But more importantly, it was extraordinarily flexible with the ability to accommodate office rearrangement. Because 18 months after the completion of this bank, 60% of the workplaces were changed with little cost and great speed. And by the end of the 1980s, the bank profits were up 38% since Foster was commissioned. The bank grew rapidly around the world, and a few years later, in 1993, they ended up moving its headquarters to London. When I look at this tower, I'm in awe. I wonder if I'll ever be able to work on a project like this. To have a client to ask for the absolute best. To be able to go around the world to find the best engineers, consultants, and contractors. To be able to design every little detail, including the toilet roll holder. There were many times where the technology did not exist for what they wanted to build. So they just invented it. This project is remarkable because they were able to break the mold and do something truly different. And I think that's something to be actually be proud of. Because if we all just continue to follow what's been done before, what would the world look like? If we continue to strive, to innovate, and to learn, there's no telling what wonders await us.